Thanks very much for staying with us. Time now for Eye on Africa with me, Georgia Calvin-Smith. Tonight, South Africa loses a prominent cabinet minister to Covid-19. Jackson Mthembu was the face of the country's coronavirus response. Africa's CDC warns that the continent's second wave is leading to higher fatality rates than the world average. Also, the UN warns that an Islamist insurgency in northern Mozambique has caused a deepening humanitarian crisis. More than 500,000 people have been displaced since extremists first began attacks in Cabo Delgado in 2017. And in Ethiopia, Orthodox Christians flock to Gondar to celebrate Epiphany, or Timket. This year, the city has also been the departure point for many Amhara soldiers heading off to fight in a conflict in the neighbouring region of Tigray. But first, Africa's second wave has pushed its fatality rate higher than the world average. It's currently at around 2.5% compared to the global average of 2.2%. The continent's also trailing in the race to source vaccines. South Africa claims that it's been quoted 2.5 times what most of the EU pays to buy AstraZeneca's vaccine. On Thursday, the country, which is Africa's worst hit by the pandemic, lost Cabinet Minister Jackson Mthembu to Covid-19. The 62-year-old was a central figure in communicating the government's coronavirus response to the public. Speaking to France 24 on Thursday, the head of Africa's CDC said that stretched health systems are leading to worse outcomes on the continent.
Extremely concerned that our second wave of the pandemic is fierce than the first wave. As we speak, we have recorded a total of 3.3 million cases across the continent with about 80,000 deaths. But to really put that in context, it's better to compare the rates of deaths in the first wave and the second wave. It took us 150 days to record 20,000 deaths during the first wave. Now it has taken us less than 25 days to record 20,000 deaths. So that is how quickly the death rates are increasing. And also significant is that over 20 countries are now reporting case fatality rates that are above the global average of 2.2. So the second wave is really fierce, and the impact is, in terms of mortality, is beginning to be felt. So what are the interventions that we need to do now? First of all, again, I'm really calling on the leadership of the continent, the political leadership, to engage with the community, subsidize prevention measures such as masks, so that we prevent it upfront. If we prevent the infections upfront, then of course we are directly preventing deaths. I think that is one. The second thing we must do is, again, with strong support from the political leadership and partners, is to make sure that we equip hospitals with oxygen. It is really a strong appeal I'm making to the continent that, we should have enough oxygen to support and manage cases of COVID-19. A lot of our deaths are occurring just because of shortage of oxygen across our medical facilities. And thirdly, we have to work very hard to make sure that vaccines are available to protect our healthcare workers so that they can be immunized as the first line of defense, so that they can take care of people, a large number of patients that will be infected. I think those are the key things that, as a continent, we have to do as a collective.
Well, new US President Joe Biden followed through and repealed the travel ban on some African and Muslim nations brought in under his predecessor. Biden signed an executive order to ditch the controversial immigration policies on his first day in office. The ban had affected nationals of more than a dozen countries, including Eritrea, Nigeria, Sudan, and Tanzania. Well, the UN's warned that the insurgency in northern Mozambique has caused a humanitarian crisis that will just get worse without international help. Islamist militants first staged attacks in Cabo Delgado in 2017, and the violence has just escalated since. Sam Bradpeace tells us more.
In northern Mozambique's Cabo Delgado region continues to grow. The UN sounded the alarm on Wednesday, saying that 565,000 people living in the area had been forcibly displaced and that at least 2,000 people had been killed in fighting, a figure that some observers say could actually be much higher. Now, in total, 1.6 million people living in the area are said to be in need of humanitarian assistance.
The situation keeps deteriorating. The number of displaced people is increasing every day, and we all need to act more and now if we want to avoid a humanitarian catastrophe.
The intensity of the violence in northern Mozambique appears to have grown since 2019, when militants there swore allegiance to Islamic State. Last November, in one single incident, at least 50 people were beheaded all at once. Now, all of this is, of course, extremely worrying, and the insurgency does continue to grow. Many people are attracted to it because simply in northern Mozambique there aren't the economic opportunities for the vast majority, especially to access the area's vast gas and ruby wealth. Now, the UN says that if the violence is to be curbed, if the insurgency is to be curbed, and if the humanitarian situation is to be resolved, what we really need are targeted development programs which give economic opportunities to the vast majority of people living there who currently don't have access to them.
Well, Algeria has kept silent in response to France's refusal to officially apologise for colonial abuses, but some Algerian citizens say that they are disappointed by President Emmanuel Macron's stance. Meanwhile, a report on the two countries' complex relationship has recommended a Memory and Truth Commission be set up to tackle the enduring damage caused by French occupation and Algeria's traumatic war of independence. Olivia Salazar-Winspear has more.
A painful history, but above all, one that must be shared. That's one of the messages from Benjamin Stora's report on France's attitude to its colonial past in Algeria. President Macron commissioned this leading historian to explore the consequences of 132 years of French presence in Algeria and the 8 years of bloody conflict that resulted in its independence.
C'est-à-dire des générations entières sont passées sur les bancs du lycée et de l'université sans même savoir ce qu'était la colonisation, la guerre d'Algérie. Donc il faut rattraper ce retard. Donc ça va prendre du temps, bien entendu. C'est un travail de longue durée.
His recommendations include a new approach to education and better access to historical archives, which are currently being formatted for digital consultation. He's calling for an investigation into the French nuclear tests in the Sahara and into the so-called disappeared of the war. Stora has spoken of, quote, competing claims of victimization from both nations today. Yet for him, understanding alternative perspectives is the only way to move forward together.
La grande question, c'est d'essayer de comprendre aussi la souffrance de l'autre, c'est-à-dire des Algériens aussi. C'est-à-dire de faire en sorte que la circulation des mémoires puisse exister réellement, rentrer dans la compréhension de ce qu'a été l'autre pour fabriquer un discours, en France notamment, qui permette d'unifier les mémoires et non pas de les opposer et de les communautariser.
Despite calling colonization a crime against humanity on a visit to Algeria, Emmanuel Macron has ruled out an official apology, a position supported by Stora, who feels it would be a dead end, playing into the hands of the far right. He's calling instead for a Truth and Memory Commission to try to heal the wounds of a complex and painful relationship which has left deep scars on both sides of the Mediterranean.
Well, Central African Republic declared a state of emergency on Thursday to help it crack down on armed groups, as the UN's envoy to the country called for the deployment of many more peacekeepers in response to a recent surge in attacks. Our correspondent in the country sent us this report.
We are still waiting for more details, but this state of emergency, which will last 15 days, should allow the government and the National Army to broaden their field of action in a country that has been torn apart by a new rebellion since mid-December. Here in Bangui, the situation remains very tense after the coordinated attack by armed groups on the capital on January 13th. That was pushed back. Lately, military operations have continued to dislodge rebels from certain positions and prepare defenses against a potential second attack. Re-elected President Touadéra said Tuesday in an interview for France 24 that no citizen should be left behind and said, I quote, that he wanted to reach out to all patriots for the reconciliation. While the opposition disputes the legitimacy of the ballot, nearly half of the country did not vote because of the presence of armed groups. More than 60,000 Central Africans are said to have taken refuge outside national territory, and other tens of thousands have fled their village and the fighting.
Well, finally, this week saw thousands of visitors heading to the Ethiopian city of Gondar for the celebration of the Orthodox Christian festival of Epiphany, or Timket. Gondar is also from where, over the past few months, Amhara soldiers and militia set out for neighbouring Tigray, where a conflict has been unfolding since the end of last year. Our correspondent tells us more.
Every year, thousands of Orthodox Ethiopians renew their baptism in Gondar's Fasilides baths. Epiphany, or Timket, is a big celebration for the faithful. This year's festival falls at a difficult time. Only a few months ago, Amhara fighters were leaving daily to head to neighboring Tigray to fight dissident TPLF forces. The Ethiopian government has since announced its victory in the conflict. Taobech is getting ready for Epiphany. During the hostilities, she went to the hospital several times to help look after Amhara soldiers injured on the battlefield. This procession is following replicas of the Ark of the Covenant towards the Fasilides baths. In the crowd, many Amharas say they're relieved at the announced defeat of the Tigrayan forces, even though fighting continues. Many are celebrating the recapture of Wolkait, a zone long claimed by the Amhara. Melkamu spent more than a week in Tigray to take supplies to Amhara soldiers.
እንግዶች ይመጣሉ እና ይሄን አመት ለየት የሚያደርገው በማለት ወልቃይት ከጎንደር ጋር የተገናኘበት የበለጠ ደስ የሚል አመት ነው። የወልቃይት ሰው ይመጣል፣ የኤርትራ ሰው ይመጣል፣ ከእስራኤልም ከብዙ ሀገራት የተለያዩ ሀገራት.
Despite the festive atmosphere in Gondar, clashes are still being reported in several parts of Tigray, where a large-scale humanitarian crisis is unfolding. Interethnic violence is also increasing in other regions of the country.
Well, that's it for Eye on Africa for now. Thanks for joining us. See you so again. Take care.
If you want to really understand what's going on in the world, you need to follow the money.
In People in Profit, we tackle the biggest stories in the global economy and break down why they matter to you.
From mega mergers to market crashes and those new business ideas that just could change the world.
In this economy, it's the show you can't afford to miss.
Join us every week for your essential business briefing.
People and Profit on France 24 and France24.com.